the kid who demanded my cabin keys. The morning air over Blackwood Lake was quiet as I stepped onto the porch with my fishing rod and a mug of coffee. My grandfather built this cabin almost 60 years ago, long before luxury homes and HOAs showed up on this shoreline. Every summer my childhood happened here. After retiring from the police department, I spent even more time out here, the one place nobody cared about rank or paperwork. For years it stayed peaceful. Then developers moved in and turned the neighboring properties into expensive vacation homes. Within months, an HOA appeared, complete with its own clubhouse and rules. Most people went along with it, but my cabin sat outside their boundaries. My land had never belonged to the HOA, and I planned to keep it that way. The HOA president, Diane Parker, liked reminding people she ran the neighborhood. Her son Ethan had just come back from college and got fixated on my property fast. Unlike the modern glass houses along the shore, my cabin sat on the highest point of the lake with the best view around, and Ethan decided he deserved it. The first offer showed up in my mailbox that spring. Diane claimed her family wanted to preserve the community spirit by buying my land. Solid number attached, but I trashed it without a second thought. 2 weeks later, a bigger offer came, then phone calls, emails, agents at my door. My answer never changed. Not for sale. That clearly bothered Ethan. Neighbors said he kept talking about turning the place into a private retreat for his friends. Diane pushed just as hard, insisting the whole lakeside would benefit if I joined the HOA, even though everybody knew she had zero authority over my land. One Saturday, I was on the porch cleaning my gear when tires crunched up the driveway. Diane's SUV rolled up, Ethan right behind her. Neither looked like they'd come for the view. Without a hello, Diane marched onto the porch talking about the association's expansion plans, insisting my cabin was blocking important improvements. Ethan stood there arms crossed, staring at the house like he already owned it. I let her finish. When she paused, I reminded her the property had belonged to my family for generations and was legally separate from her HOA. I figured that would end it. Instead, Ethan stepped forward. "You've had this place long enough," he snapped. "You should hand it over." I almost laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He pointed at the wooden table beside my chair, where my cabin keys sat next to a leather badge holder I rarely carried anymore. "Give us the keys," he said, loud enough that a few neighbors near the shore stopped to watch. Diane didn't stop him. If anything, she expected me to just hand them over. I looked at the keys, then back at Ethan. 20 years in law enforcement teaches you that angry people show their real character the moment they don't get their way. I stayed calm and asked if he understood what he was demanding. He got louder instead. Diane started threatening lawsuits, claiming the HOA would eventually force me out. Ethan paced the yard talking about renovations and boat docks like the deal was already done. I just sat back down and kept untangling my fishing line. Neither paid the badge on the table any real attention. Ethan glanced at it once and figured it was some old souvenir. Diane barely looked. Had either bothered to ask. They have learned I retired as a lieutenant from a county police department just 2 years earlier. The argument kept going until a worried neighbor quietly called it in. About 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights bouncing off the water. The crowd went silent. Diane straightened up and marched toward the officers with a confident smile, pointing at me and explaining that I was refusing to cooperate with the association. Ethan stood behind her, clearly expecting backup. The senior officer barely listened. His eyes had landed on the badge sitting beside my keys. Recognition crossed his face. "Lieutenant Morrison?" he asked. I nodded and shook his hand. Ethan's expression changed instantly. Diane looked between the officers and me, suddenly unsure. The younger officers greeted me warmly, one even asking how retirement was treating me. For a few awkward seconds, nobody said anything. Then I explained what had happened. The officers listened, then turned to Diane and Ethan and made it clear. My property was private, outside HOA jurisdiction, and demanding access to someone else's home could create real legal trouble. Ethan's confidence drained on the spot. The same guy shouting minutes earlier now stared silently at the ground. Diane tried to soften it into just a misunderstanding, but nobody was buying it. After a warning, The officers told everyone to head home. Neighbors drifted off one by one, and Diane and Ethan climbed back into their SUV without another word. As the engine noise faded, I sat back down and picked up my rod. The keys were still on the table, exactly where they'd been all afternoon, badge right beside them. Sun dipped behind the trees, gold light spreading across the lake. Some people see an old cabin and think ownership. Others eventually learn that respect matters a lot more than entitlement.